Sophie Lane lived with the simplicity of someone who finds comfort in small daily gestures. A morning coffee, the pages of a book flipped through at the library, walks in the park at sunset. She had grown up among the silent shelves of the Windsor Public Library and, over the years, those corridors had become her safest refuge. Nevertheless, she felt something was missing, a discreet, warm presence capable of offering her a different kind of companionship. It was thus that, on a spring Sunday, she allowed herself to be persuaded by Laura, her lifelong friend, to visit the county animal shelter. She promised herself she wouldn't adopt anything. She was merely curious to take a look. Yet, as soon as she entered that room filled with cages and blankets, something made her heart skip a beat. A tabby kitten, curled up in a dusty basket, lifted its head and looked at her with golden, curious eyes. It wasn't a distracted glance. It was a plea for attention. When Sophie reached out her hand, the little one responded with a soft leap and nestled onto her arm, purring so loudly it made even the shelter staff smile. In that moment, as if an invisible thread had bound two destinies together, Sophie understood that she would not leave without him. She chose to name him Julio, in tribute to an old explorer from her childhood novels, and from that moment their bond became the center of a new world, brighter yet surprisingly familiar. In the days that followed, Julio discovered his new home, the windowsill where he could watch passers-by and the little boats along the Detroit River, the pillow beside the nightstand, perfect for accompanying Sophie's evening reading, the soft rug by the sofa, the scene of lazy winter mornings. Each morning, the kitten waited patiently while she made her tea, and each evening she welcomed him home from work with a greeting, meow. Weekends were their favorite times. Slow breakfasts, cozy blankets, the sound of raindrops sketching patterns on the windows. Sophie devoted herself to her companion with care. She brushed his striped fur until it gleamed, selected high-quality kibble, and scheduled regular veterinary checkups. Following the shelter staff's advice, she had Julio microchipped as a kitten, a silent yet reassuring safeguard. As time passed, every gesture, even simply seeing him off at the door, became a daily dance of trust and affection. Together, they had built a small universe of certainties. The window overlooking the garden, the rug where Julio performed his somersaults, the scent of tea lingering in the kitchen. Nothing seemed able to come between them. One autumn morning, when the air was crisp and the leaves strewn across the driveway painted red and golden patches, Sophie was tending her balcony plants, leaving the door ajar for just a moment. On her return, Julio had vanished. At first she thought it was a game, and that he would come back in a flash as always. But time passed and her unease grew, twisting her chest in a vice of anxiety. She called his name through the silent alleys, posted flyers around the neighborhood, and contacted every shelter in the area. Each day, a small dish of food remained untouched by the door, a sign that Julio had not managed to return. The nights became sleepless. The first Christmas without him was the most painful, with a little silver bell hung on the tree to remind her of his absence. Friends advised her to adopt another cat, but for Sophie, no one could replace that companion whose purrs had nestled into her heart. The months passed slowly, each marked by hope and fear. On rainy nights she dreamed of seeing him appear on the doorstep, soaked but alive, and every morning she awoke to an empty space under the covers. Yet she never stopped believing, keeping alive the memory of every caress, every meow, every clear, trusting gaze. In the months following Julio's sudden disappearance, Sophie turned her pain into a daily mission. Each dawn found her already up, sweater on, and a small bundle of flyers in hand, ready to traverse streets and lanes. She called her cat's name at the top of her voice, hoping for a meow in response, and did not hesitate to push out to the edges of the neighborhood, where stray cats sought refuge among abandoned fruit crates. In the evening, returning home, she paused before every lit window, looking inside with the secret hope of seeing him curled up on the windowsill. When the little dish of kibble remained untouched, she considered it a small personal failure. but would relent only to prepare herself to do better the next day. She had no friends available around the clock, but counted on word of mouth among the neighbors, who began to recognize her as the woman with the missing cat. Some offered help, others simply a sympathetic smile. Over time, she learned the names and stories of other lost animals: the rabbit that slipped from its carrier, the puppy that followed a truck, the parrot that flew away. She shared updates on social media, tagging shelters and adoption groups, driven by an almost stubborn hope. In every post, she included a photo of Julio as a kitten, eyes wide and fur still short, to keep his memory alive in the minds of anyone who might have encountered him. Nearly 7 years passed. Sophie had moved house, settling into a cozier apartment where the walls echoed with the tolling of her fears but also her achievements. On the refrigerator, a collage of yellowed flyers. On the desk, emails sent to various associations. Every now and then she closed her eyes and returned in her mind to that autumn day when she lost him. The rustle of leaves, the scent of burning wood in the fireplaces, the low sun lengthening the shadows. On those lonely nights, she dreamed of Julio slipping in with silent steps, curling up against her legs and purring. Upon waking, she found tears of relief or despair, depending on the dream. Although she had learned to live without him, she had never stopped keeping her old phone number active, a kind of compass guiding her toward hope. It was on a March morning, when the sky was still gray and a light mist hung over the streets, that the phone rang. A gentle voice on the other end said to her, "We've found a tabby cat, thin and battered, near an abandoned warehouse. The microchip shows his name." Sophie's legs gave way, and in an instant she found herself gathering her keys and coat, forgetting the cold and the fog. She was convinced that if Julio had truly returned, she would feel it resonate in her heart. Arriving at the shelter, her heart pounding in her throat, she saw a veteran staff member sitting at the desk. In a kind voice, he invited her to sit in a room behind the cages. There, curled up in a corner, was a tabby cat looking exhausted. His bones showed under matted fur, his left eye clouded by infection, and his ear slightly nicked. But when the door opened, the little cat lifted his head, squinted his only clear eye, and gave a faint trill. "Sophie," the woman murmured in her mind. She called him by name in a soft voice, and Julio replied with a faint meow, staggering toward her. Her hands shook as she reached out. His tail, though thin, waved like a flag. When she finally wrapped him in her embrace, every pent-up emotion burst forth in tears of both joy and fear. It was no longer a dream. It was the reality she had chased for years. The journey home was a whirlwind of emotions. Julio, wrapped in a warm blanket, made gentle somersaults in his carrier, as if recognizing every corner of the vehicle that was bringing him back to his final refuge. Sophie drove slowly, without haste, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. In those tired little eyes, she saw the echo of years of wandering and the promise of a safe shelter. As soon as they crossed the threshold of the apartment, the small body stretched out on the doorstep, wavering slightly. Sophie lifted him gently, placed him on his special spot, a soft cushion, the hot water bottle warmed, and his old toys still scented with memories, and felt her own heartbeat slow, absorbed in a sigh of relief. Their first night together was marked by long silences and suspended caresses. Julio curled up against Sophie's neck, his purrs barely perceptible, and she stayed awake until she was certain that fragile breath had become steady. The following morning brought Dr. Verer and Dr. Werner, called in urgently for a sudden crisis. Julio had experienced a series of nighttime convulsions, shaking violently on the cushion. Sophie's hands trembled as the receptionist instructed her to bring him immediately to the clinic, where Dr. Patel, a veterinary surgery specialist, would assess the severity of his condition. X-rays revealed a small metal fragment lodged near his abdomen, encased in scar tissue that was now pressing on nerves, causing pain and spasms. The operation was risky, a mortality risk above 40%, but without surgery, Julio's fate would be marked by a slow, painful decline. Sophie, her voice steady but her heart in her throat, asked them to proceed. "It can't end here. Not after all this journey." The waiting room turned into a place of endless waiting. A nurse named Marcus kept her company, updating her on each step of the operation. Every piece of news, good or bad, was an emotion she struggled to handle. When Dr. Patel finally emerged, a veil of exhaustion in his eyes and a small metal container in his hand, Sophie wept with joy. The fragment had been removed, the tissues repaired, and hope reborn. In the days of convalescence, Julio grew quieter. He barely ate anything, and each mouthful of food was administered by syringe with infinite patience. Sophie remained by his side, reading delicate passages aloud, just as she had done with the curious kitten 12 years before. His purring, at first almost absent, gradually regained strength, a sign that his spirit had not given up. It was during that time that Sophie met Evan, a volunteer who helped sick animals and visited the clinic weekly. With gentleness and discretion, he brought her a small notebook of notes on geriatric cat care, along with a smile that spoke louder than words. An immediate bond formed between them, built on simple gestures. A cup of tea shared on the porch, a chat about strategies to bring calm to Julio, a shared focus on every small improvement. As the weeks passed, Julio's coat grew soft and lustrous again, and his steps, though more cautious, returned to exploring the corners of the house. Every evening, as the sun set, Sophie, Julio, and Evan came together, the cat curled up on Sophie's lap, her book open on her knees, and a sweet, reassuring feeling of a family rebuilt piece by piece. With Julio fully recovered, Sophie's home once again filled with the small rituals that had seemed lost forever. In the morning, the cat stretched out on the windowsill, caressed by sunlight filtering through the curtains. Sophie made her coffee while watching him, a gentle smile on her face. The routine had reclaimed that precious savor that only serenity can give. They resumed their long pauses on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, with a book in her hands and the soft taps of his tail marking the pages. Often, on the little table in front of them, a dish of kibble and a bowl of water were carefully arranged, signs of an attention that went beyond mere nourishment. Evan also became a steady presence in this new daily life. He joined in the small gestures, helped dust the shelf displaying photos of kitten Julio, and suggested gentle mobility exercises for the cat. Together, the three of them reshaped their home, filling it with complicity and lightness. As the months went by, time left more evident marks on Julio's body. Steps a bit slower, jumps less agile, a few wrinkles of fur on his muzzle. Sophie learned to embrace them without fear, understanding that aging is a part of the journey for those who love wholeheartedly. To prevent joint problems, she modified the raised platform of the sofa with a small padded step and added non-slip rugs in the slipperiest spots. Veterinary visits became more frequent to monitor kidney function and check for any orthopedic discomfort. She welcomed every new recommendation with the same commitment: joint supplements, gentle massages, balanced meals to maintain ideal weight. On rainy afternoons, when the cold light filled the room, Sophie read tales of old, wise cats and jotted down useful ideas to make Julio's life more comfortable. Evan would occasionally send her articles and studies, and together they discussed new strategies to ease the daily challenges. One winter evening, while rain drummed on the roof, Sophie sat beside the lit fireplace with Julio resting in her lap. Her gaze was steady, full of gratitude for the years they'd shared. She thought of how a tiny creature of just a few months had changed her life, teaching her patience, tenacity, and the capacity to love without reservation. She also reflected on the sacrifices made: sleepless nights, anxiety at every absence, the dash to the clinic at a sudden alert. Those had been moments of fear, but also of discovery. She had found in herself a strength she never knew she possessed. And now, the gentle sound of Julio's purring, steady and reassuring, was proof that true love overcomes every obstacle, even the passage of years. In the embrace of that silent evening, Sophie made a promise to cherish those memories and continue to honor Julio's life, even when his paws could no longer follow her. Because, she thought, there is no greater reward than the affection of a loyal friend, a bond that illuminates even the darkest days. Whenever Sophie leafed through the photo album on the coffee table, she rediscovered faces and moments from an intense past. Julio's first glance at the shelter, his awkward leap among the library shelves, the tribute purrs on rainy nights. Those memories were the soundtrack of a love that grew little by little, day after day. On drizzly afternoons, Sophie sat by the window and let her memories guide her. The warmth of Julio's embrace when she was cold, the sound of his soft steps on the hardwood floor, the burst of joy when she returned home after a long day. Each fragment reassured her that, even when absence seemed eternal, the true bond remains indelible in the soul. As the years passed, Sophie's apartment became a small sanctuary of affection. Scattered cushions and Julio's toys, a vase of white daisies on the table, and an antique lamp lit every evening to accompany their reading. When Julio, now an elderly cat, moved with slow determination, Sophie would rush to support him, aware that each step was a precious gift. In moments of silence, Evan often came in, bringing the scent of tea and a sincere smile. Words were unnecessary. His discreet, attentive presence was enough to make that home even more welcoming. The three of them, each moving at their own pace, had created a new harmony based on respecting each other's rhythms and sharing small daily gestures. Springford, a small village a few kilometers from Windsor, became the destination of their Sunday outings. Amid flower-filled meadows and tree-lined paths, Sophie held Julio in her arms while Evan told stories of other rescued animals. Life took a different turn. The solitude of old times was replaced by a sense of community and shared care. Sophie decided to turn her own experience into concrete help for others. She organized a small volunteer group involving neighbors and colleagues to bring food and attention to stray cats. Sharing fears and hopes made even the grayest days lighter and showed her how a single act of kindness could create a wave of warmth. One autumn morning, Julio didn't run as usual to the windowsill. He simply watched the sun rise, his expression peaceful and deep. Sophie realized that their journey was about to come full circle. She gently stroked him, thanking him for every shared moment, for every emotion that had moved her heart. When, a few days later, Julio fell asleep forever, he did so wrapped in the most intense affection. Sophie felt a sharp pain, but also the knowledge that she had both given and received authentic love. In that moment, she understood that life is made of meetings and farewells, but that the beauty of a bond remains forever in memory. Even today, passing by her home window, Sophie recalls the sound of Julio's little paws on the sill. The old photo album has become a shared treasure on the blog she founded, where animal lovers find comfort and inspiration every week. Evan stood by her side, helping her transform pain into hope and giving voice to many similar stories. That little tabby cat, who arrived by chance at a shelter, left an indelible mark. He taught a woman that true love, when real, overcomes the toughest trials and makes every moment of life a precious gift. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other videos like this. Share your thoughts in the comments. We're curious to hear what you think. See you soon.